Welcome, 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 family, friends, EXPs, people that I may not know. I just want to first thank you guys for taking the time to join me and my panel tonight for this very informative and thought-provoking discussion. As you guys know, we're going to be talking race and discrimination here in America. And we're going to be looking for all of your feedback, for all of your questions, and for all of your comments. So in order to go ahead and get started, we are first going to set some house rules. First things first, I want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard tonight, that we are having a respectful conversation. And just like family, we may not always agree, but we are going to respect each other's opinion. Secondly, TJ just joined me. Secondly, I want to make sure that my speakers tonight have an opportunity not only for their voices to be heard, but for everyone who's joining us tonight to have the chance to go back and forth and talk about their instances and their experiences with regards to the questions that we're going to go over tonight. Every question, we're going to try to get to them, but in the event that we don't, my hope is that you guys find this video insightful, that you learn something from each one of these individuals tonight, and you take something away that you'll be able to apply in your own life. All right. I've also created a link in the description with some different educational resources, as well as information that you can take part in to begin today, whether that's reading different books, participating in different initiatives or different podcasts. All right. So without further ado, I am first going to start this discussion tonight by defining the terms racism and discrimination. Discrimination, first off, is defined as the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. And racism, got that pulled up here, is defined as prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism, directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's race is superior. So with that being said, we are going to I'm going to introduce my panel tonight and let each one of them have the floor tonight and tell you about their experiences of discrimination, as well as how this current culture and the things that we're experiencing within society is affecting them. So let's go ahead and start with Mike Nguyen.
Hello, my name is Mike. I'm from LA. I am Asian as well as being gay, so it's a double whammy. I get. Are we starting with the conversation or? Hello?
Yes, just talk about why this topic and what's going on with George Floyd and the killings of Black men has impacted you so much, because I've been looking at your Facebook post and your Facebook feed.
So the situation that's going on in America right now is really it's huge. It's a huge movement that's going on, and it's not just America. It's also in Europe. It's going on in Japan and lots of countries that are protesting right now because of this movement. I do believe that everyone has a right to live their life without being judged for who they are, because I've experienced that as well as a minority and being gay. So growing up, I've gotten teachers who were racist to me, and then not only that, I had to deal with peers that judged me because I was gay. So that was like two things that I was getting attacked for, and it was just a lot for me growing up. I actually had suicidal thoughts when I was younger because I didn't know what to do or who to turn to, because people don't understand that when you're LGBT, like not everyone's out with their parents, and especially coming from a conservative side for Asian parents, they're very conservative. They don't really accept you being gay, or if you have any, and they really don't talk to you about like your emotions either. Like conservative Asian parents, they expect you to like, not, I'm not talking about all Asian parents, but the majority of them, they don't know how to express themselves with you. Like they tell you like they love you, they act like they do acts that show their affection, but they don't like sit down and talk to you like American families, where you sit in dinner table and you're like, oh, okay, like how's your day today, like son? Like we don't do that. He asked the things that they ask is like, oh, did you finish your homework? Like, are your grades good? It's more about academics more than emotion for Asian families. So like I remember like I was talking to my mom one time about how like certain kids were bullying me because I was gay when I was in middle school, and she told me like, um, what did you do? Like, what did you do to them? Why would they just pick on you? Like, coming from her time and her like in Vietnam, people don't like they don't expect people to like pick on you for your differences, because I guess because in their country everyone's the same and there's not that many diverse people. But in the United States it's a lot different, where there's all sexualities, there's all different ethnicities, and for me, this George Floyd case is hits home because I'm also a minority. Although I am not Black, we also deal with racism. So I feel like we should all have this conversation with all races, not just Blacks, whites. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, Ashley, let me bring you into this conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As we all know, that's kind of the epicenter of what's happening right now with the civil unrest in our country. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia, though. Moved a couple years ago for my career. You know, and I, of course, as a white person, have not experienced racism, and I can't even pretend to understand, you know, the people of color, what they go through on a daily basis, hourly basis. I can't even pretend. I think this hits close to home, literally. I have friends and family who live in Minneapolis, you know, just less than a half a mile from where George Floyd was killed. So, you know, I watch the news, I see everything happening, you know, and it hits because it is my hometown. You know, as far as discrimination, I obviously I'm a woman, so I work in the sports industry. You know, I'm a woman working in the sports industry, so I have experienced, you know, some discrimination, you know, subtle gestures. I'm ignored by men a lot. I'm in a room with a lot of men. So as far as discrimination goes, I've felt that. But again, it's nothing that compares to the racism that is going on within this country currently, as it has for years and years and years. So I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. You know, I'm kind of new on my journey to becoming anti-racist, and those are things that are learned from such a young age, and especially, you know, being born and raised in Minnesota. You know, there's a stat out there that it actually is the 45th out of 50 states for racial integration. So I grew up in a very white neighborhood. These are things that are just learned, you know, when we grow up. So, you know, I'm just newer on my journey to, you know, making myself an anti-racist and actively getting involved in conversations and getting uncomfortable. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to be listening to, you know, so many of you and hearing your experiences. It means a lot. So.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for being so transparent and so honest. That's extremely important. T, anything you want to add?
No, I would just say for the conversation, having that open dialogue, that's the start where everyone needs to start it, is the open dialogue, because a lot of races don't have that they can sit down at the table and enjoy and understand each other's culture, because everyone's culture is different. And
Right.
once you understand each other's culture, you know how to navigate and I would say how to interact with another race, not in a disrespectful manner, just in a respectful manner. So the open dialogue where you guys are setting right now is what's needed. A lot of backlash is going on, yes, because the extent of what has occurred, but this open dialogue sets the tone and is needed. And I appreciate everyone joining in on on dialogue, open dialogue with this the racism and discrimination.
All right. Jay Woo, go ahead and introduce yourself for those who may not know you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Woods. I am a 48-year-old African-American male here living in Atlanta for close to 26 years now. I'm a father. I'm a son. I am an active member of my church. And over the last couple of weeks, I've gotten mad as hell like everyone else. I am originally from New York. I was raised between there and Detroit. I come from a very diverse background. I had a father that was so affected by the discrimination and law, Jim Crow laws in Tuskegee, Alabama. Also, he was so affected by it that he told me as a child that when I die, no matter what you do to me in my life, don't bury me back in Alabama. I lost aunts and uncles, I lost uncles in the Tuskegee experiment. My family got to, my mother's side of the family got to Detroit because my great grandfather was ran out of Talladega, Alabama, because the federal government was looking for him before he migrated north. And when we talk about discrimination so much today, one of the biggest things for me is, out of everything from my past that has, the getting stopped, getting pulled over, getting the double looks, getting followed in the store. One good thing about being in this experiential marketing industry, it afforded me the opportunity to be able to travel this country extensively, especially in the areas where very few people look like me, such as Fargo, North Dakota. But you almost have to laugh off when an old white man sees you in a Target and he gives you a double look or this, or you get the strange, and you got to be like, yeah, and I literally told the guy when he did that, I was like, don't worry about that. I'm only here for 96 hours. It was a bit of a chuckle, but there's certain things that, we go through and I go through on a daily basis, personally and professionally, extra words that I shouldn't have to. All my life, I've been given that talk about how you're supposed to act and how you're supposed to do this, this, and this around white folks, around police, and around everything else, just to make sure that you can make it home safe. I've had to also give my son a version of that talk, but part of that version of that talk with my son is changing, and a lot of it is dealing with the change other times, as well as educating ourselves. So I'm excited about being here this evening. I'm going to share a lot more details about myself throughout the evening and throughout future conversations that we're going to be part of. But I'm actually open to be here. I think that America has a deep wound, and the murder of Brother George Floyd was finally that scab being pulled off that wound. And now with this conversation, we can start healing through God's grace. Boom.
Well said. Thank you, Jason. Let's go ahead and turn over to Iffy and get her perspective as well.
Awesome. All right, guys. So my name is Iffy. That's the nickname that I have to give because, when I'm in America, if you tell someone your name is Ifeanyi Chukwu Chebonamo Gasi Obiako, they're gonna act like you're crazy, right? So my nickname for the purpose of conversation is Iffy. I am as diverse as it comes. I'm an immigrant, so I think that bringing that perspective to the conversation is going to be a little bit interesting. But if we were to talk a little bit about my background, I was born in London. I was born in England. To a daughter of a diplomat, so we traveled by default. Every 4 years we moved to a new country. That's just kind of how diplomacy works. So I lived in London, Nigeria, Canada, Venezuela, Portugal before I moved to the United States in 2010. So I've had a very interesting perspective as it pertains to racism because, you know, I've experienced racism in America, yes, but that wasn't where it started. I experienced racism in Venezuela. I experienced racism in Portugal. So coming to the U.S., it's a different style of racism, right? Because I ask myself, why are we still having this conversation in 2020 in the United States of America, which by default is supposed to be the leader of the rest of the world? So it's been an interesting, interesting years that I spent here in the U.S. And I would say that this conversation that we're having is really remarkable because we're pretty much in a weird time as a society where everyone is allowed to talk about Black lives and Black Lives Matter without feeling uncomfortable, or even if you feel uncomfortable, it's unfortunate because this is where we're at. Like, we're at a place where we're putting it all on the line here. So I'm happy to be a part of this conversation, as everybody else, and I think anybody with common sense. As somebody who watched that video, I was outraged, disgusted, frightened as well, because it puts a lot of things into perspective. For me, as a Black female, as an immigrant living in the United States, facing racism, one, for being Black, but two, for not being from here. So I often get the, when are you going back to your country? Or you must be so lucky to be in America. Like that's a different type of racism that I don't think African Americans experience, as not to say that any is better than the other, but that's a whole other conversation to have, being an African in America and also being Black. So I get them as they come through. And I've learned to put the blockers up. And I think this conversation we're about to have is going to be opening the question, why should we have to put blockers up? Why should we have to be uncomfortable in order to make white people comfortable? So there are many conversations and topics we're going to be talking about today that I look forward to joining in on. And I'm happy to be here.
Well said. And we got to have that conversation about being an African American in Africa. That's important. I mean, being an African American in America, and being African living in this country. That's important because me and T talked about that a couple of days ago. And that dynamic is something that a lot of people really don't talk about because here in Atlanta, there is a high African population, but oftentimes, they look at themselves as, a little bit more superior than the Black people that are here. So we definitely got to have that conversation.
That is definitely a conversation.
Right? Thank you for sharing.
For sure.
Oh, goodness. All right. So, hey, y'all, my name is PJ. I understand we're talking about racism. When we talk about racism, the one thing that we don't really talk about that we ought to is whiteness. There is no racism without whiteness. And so, as shameful as it is, whiteness is not a culture. It's the unearned privilege of one group, right, to enjoy power and privileges by design at the expense of, in this case, all living beings on the planet, and especially Black people, in this moment. And so, I'm not an anti-racist. This is going to sound ridiculous. I'm an anti-whiteist. right, is that I refuse to be white in the ways in which white people are supposed to behave oppressively. And so my work as a father of girls who will be white is to inoculate whiteness as it is a virus, is to disrupt the madness that white people have around thinking that everything belongs to them, or that when they finally have an epiphany, then that they have to go and save people of color. And so I think for me, my work, and I do this a lot, is to reimagine what it means to be a white human being by being human, and to invite, in my case, white people into their higher selves. And so I don't focus my direction towards working with and saving with Black boys, although that's not exactly true. I've done that work, and so I've had that kind of sense of, let me graduate to turning on behalf of my people. So I met Jay Woo, 25 years ago in what was the inner city of Atlanta, which has now been completely gentrified, called Summerhill. And in that 25 years, Jay and I witnessed 6 children who are Black. They were not Black children to me. They were children who were Black, die on my baseball team, on our baseball team. Jay was a coach with me. And so the carnage of one constituent, in my case, children who I know that were Black, is an abomination. And it's a result of the unexamined white military that we have. And here's the gift that I think people need to realize. The US military was occupying the Supreme Court today on behalf of a white racist. Whiteness is at its last leg, as well as empire, is that it is literally imploding as we speak. And so we're seeing white people finally come into the street, tra, tra, tra. In the same way during the women's movement, we saw white women coming into the streets. Problem is they don't know how to fight against oppression. It's not within our lived experience. And so what we as activists and woke people, both, the queer community has so much around intersectionality to offer the movement. All of us have so much to offer. But I think it was President Obama today is that I think that there is the crucible within American culture, within Blackness, to make free our country. It is the Harriet Tubman-ness of our country that will only create the America that never has been. And so I think it's a real privilege to be in this moment, working in solidarity, locking arms, to save this country, or to at least live it into something that it's pretended to be for so long. So it's a pleasure to be here too.
Thank you, PJ, for sharing that. I appreciate it. All right, let's go to MJ.
Hey everyone, I'm MJ Burst. I actually live in Minneapolis right now. I'm not from there originally, but I've lived up there for about 7 years now, and I am about 5 blocks from the 3rd precinct. So my neighborhood has been absolutely destroyed. It's been a very emotional and overwhelming past couple of days, and it's been really cool to see the community kind of come together through such a tragedy. And it's also been really sad seeing the businesses that have been just destroyed and the lives that have been really just kind of changed forever because of the death of George Floyd. And I didn't know George, but I've spent a lot of time in the community over the past couple days just learning about him, and like I'm in the thick of it. I've been out in the community kind of doing different things. Today I went out with some friends and we went to a little bit further down Lake Street. So I live on 33rd and Lake, and Minnehaha and Lake is where the 3rd precinct was. So that's about 5 blocks from my house. And pretty much everything there, I mean, it's either been burned to the ground or it's pretty much vacated. Most of the cleanup there has been done. So we went a little bit further down Lake Street, a little bit further west, and we're looking at buildings basically just to start cleaning up the graffiti. So we went to a grocery store. Pretty much all the grocery stores are gone now. So there's a little store, it's a Mexican grocery store, and they had all this graffiti on the wall with a bunch of curse words and just other things. So we came with graffiti cleanup supplies and just started scrubbing the walls, and this little Mexican woman came out and she was just in tears because she was so grateful for us to be just to be helping, because it's been a lot for her as well. And while we were cleaning up, we had other people come and join us and hop in and grab scrub brushes and grab cleaner and ask how they could help. And it was just a really cool experience to just kind of be out there in the streets, rebuilding and taking a really sad situation and turning it into something positive and trying to make a positive impact in the community. And I remember when I was younger, I always loved that Gandhi quote about like, be the change you want to see in the world. And I don't know. And then I thought it was cheesy for a long time. And then today it came back into my life and I was like, yeah, I actually do have to be the change that I want to see. If I'm going to clean up my neighborhood, I need to be the one doing that. If I'm going to build awareness, I need to be the one doing that. So a little bit about my background. So I am adopted. I was raised out in the country by two white parents who I love more than anything else in the world. They are such a great example of what unconditional love looks like, and they have just instilled a lot of really great values in me. And I grew up in a white town. I grew up in a white community. I think I have a different outlook than a lot of people have because I grew up literally in white America, and I didn't experience racism in a way that a lot of my friends have. Which it's been a really interesting way. I love hearing other people's stories, right? Everyone's got a story. We've all experienced different things in our lives. For me, I feel I've had a very blessed life. I'm very fortunate. I have amazing people that surround me. I have a community that when I grew up as a child was very accepting and uplifting to who I am. I mean, I was the prom queen of my all-white high school. So I really was, I don't know, I just have a very different outlook on a lot of things. And as a woman, I've spent my life in a lot of male-dominated industries. I worked in the power sports and motorcycle industry for about 5 years, and I worked in automotive prior to that. So a lot of, like a lot of white dudes, a lot of older white dudes, especially in the power sports industry. And I've had several negative experiences, but for the most part, a lot of people who were kind of uplifting and cheering me on and proud that I was doing something that was going against the grain. So for me, I think a lot of the things that I see is learning what other people have experienced. And my heart breaks for everyone who has been impacted by negative words and negative experiences and downright racism and sexism and all of the bad things that humanity is capable of doing. So for me, I believe that we can really build a better society. There are a lot of voices and opinions out there, and I think they all deserve to be heard in different ways, shapes, and forms. So I'm just really thankful to be a part of this group and to hear everyone's stories, to be able to provide my input. It's just going to be a really, I think, powerful evening. So thank you, Jay, for putting this together.
You're welcome. And thank you for everything you're doing in Minneapolis to help so many who have been impacted by the things that have been going on. I know people are crying out for help, and some of them are not showing it in the best light. So I just want to thank you for, being truly a person of the community and going out and taking time to do the things to help others. That says a lot about who you are. You have always been a light, to me. And I just want to say thank you and I appreciate you. All right, let's take it to Miles and Kanika.
Hey. So, hi, I'm Kanika Bell Brown. We co-own Encouraging Marketing together. It's an experiential marketing company. We also are both realtors. We work together in that. And, I think it's important for us to have this conversation. As African Americans, we know what happened to George Floyd is not something new to us. We've been seeing it for centuries that, as African American people, we're unjustly targeted and cops treat us differently. And, the criminal justice system treats us differently. It's not any new information. But I think that what happened with him in particular is that, there's a lot of people that are sick and tired of this. With all the peaceful protests that Kaepernick did and other players and celebrities that voiced their opinion and they did it in a peaceful way, it fell on deaf ears. The fact that there was NFL team owners that came out and did the black square on social media for Blackout Tuesday, saying that they stand for Black Lives Matter and they support, African Americans and Black lives and all that, but they didn't want to give Kaepernick a job is very hypocritical. And I think that, a lot of these corporations and Fortune 500 companies that are saying that they stand with the African American community and they're all about, stamping out bias and discrimination. And then you go to their board of directors and you go to their top executives and their leadership, and it's all white people. It's hypocritical. So, I think this is a conversation that is definitely needs to be had. To give you a little bit of background about myself, I was born and raised in Southern California. Fortunately for me, I grew up in a very, very diverse environment. So, my stepfather, he was a white guy. The neighborhoods that I grew up in, I had friends that were Cambodian and Chinese and Vietnamese and Mexican and, Samoan and everything in between. And so I was able to just really have a rainbow of people that I could, talk to and interact with and learn about different cultures and stuff. And it was a education for me in how to not discriminate against a person and really just get to know this person for who they are. And, you go off of how somebody treats you and that's it. And so I really take that into our business as being, a co-owner for our experiential marketing company. I feel like, there's a lot of companies out there that they want you to look a certain way and you have to have, a certain look in order to get hired a lot of times. And that's not how we run our business. I look at talent and I look at your abilities. And if you could do the job, you're hired. If you got a great personality, you're hired. I don't play into, you got to look a certain way. And, the people that have worked for me have seen on site, you get a rainbow when you work for me. I don't care about how you look or anything like that. As long as you could do the job, then that's what matters.
Yeah, kind of echoing what Kanika was just saying. Obviously growing up as a Jewish white male in America, I certainly cannot compare to any of the racism or prejudice that, my wife or my best friend or, my kids have gone through or will go through in the future. And, all I've really tried to do is just use my powers for good. For me, as Kanika was just saying, but, I'd echo this as I could care less if you're blue, purple, green, black, yellow, whatever. I'm going to have your back if you're a good person. And, I think speaking on behalf of the privileged white males of America, we got to do a better job of identifying the racism that exists and standing up for it. Just making a Facebook post or making an Instagram post and sharing it doesn't mean shit to me. You got to get out there and really get on the front lines and help out and, do what's right. At the end of the day, there's a lot of, outrage right now around what happened as it should be, but this stuff's been going on for years. And I've been fighting, on behalf of ending racism pretty much my entire life. That's something my mom raised me to do, standing up for the underdog and standing up for what's right. And, I just really think that conversations like this one where we can empower each other, but also get all perspectives is incredibly important. So thank you, Jamila, for setting this up.
Thank you to both of you for sharing your insight and sharing your perspective. It means so much to have all of you here. But we're going to talk about that experiential marketing tomorrow. We're going to get to that.
We're ready.
But thank you guys for taking your time. And congratulations. They having a board.
Thank you.
They did really Bill today.
Thank
Real
you so
boy.
much.
Right.
That
Appreciate
is
it.
going to end this conversation too. We're gonna get
Thank
Yeah.
you, guys.
let's go ahead and get to our other two people, and then we're gonna open this up for round table questions. All right. Shamin, let
guys, how are
everybody
you?
know, excuse me, who you are.
Well, I can't hear you, but I'm thankful for you guys for inviting me onto the panel. There's a lot going on in this country that we're all starting to wake up and see how hurt and angry the people are. And of course, that's people of color. I almost wish we don't have to have this conversation right now because it's really rough. It's really rough to speak about. It's really rough to think about all our various experiences. But I'm here today because obviously I want to express how I feel, but I also want to learn from others and their experiences and how I can better myself. So just a little background on me. I am originally from New York City. I am multicultural, multiracial, I should say. My father is Caribbean Hispanic and Southern European. His family is Roman Catholics. My mom is Japanese, and her family are a mix of Buddhist and Jews. So I have a wonderful diaspora around me and so many races, religions, and cultures that surround me, and I love that. But I also grew up with a lot of racism in my own family, and I was always taught blood is thicker than water. And there have been many times that I didn't feel that blood was thicker than water, because it certainly didn't feel like it was, our shared blood was meant anything. So I just, with George Floyd, his death, his murder, I should say, it has really affected me, and it really has brought up a lot of wounds, that we've all suffered. But I want to make sure that are able to open this dialogue and figure out how we can all just be better humans. And I think I really want to emote that the most, because as a Buddhist, we are taught to, strive to be a better human being and try to get to the next level. And I want to make sure everybody out there is able to take one point in our discussion today and learn something and just be a better human being.
Well said, Ms. Shamin. Thank you so much for that. And last but not least, Maui.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. My name is Maui, and as Ify said, it's Maui because it cannot be Mauampise Novia Parrabor. So my name is Maui. I came here when I was 14. I was raised in Venezuela, and I came here, and as a young lady, I lived in Utah for a while, and then after that, I went to Florida. And around 24, I moved to the South, because Florida, as we know, it's not the South. So Florida is just Florida. And here, it was my first time that I ever experienced any type of racist comment or situation. I was faced with something that I never, ever had faced before. And to be completely honest, like Jay said today, we're going to be raw, we're going to be honest. I think that as a Latina, I got it from both sides. I had instances in which Black women would be very, will mock me because of my accent, or laugh at my face, or will give me a look because I was dating a Black guy. I also had it from, white ladies asking me if my kid was mixed, and for me, that's something that you only ask when you have a dog, right? I was like, he's just 100% Latino. He's not mixed with anything. He's a human. So for me, it was a very bizarre situation. It was entering a different world. And then I found other type of people, I will say, and other humans that saw me for who I was. And then I started getting from those different races, I started getting also love and acceptance and appreciation and respect. And I have strived in my, I'm a loan officer, and I have strived to actually teach my community, the Hispanic community, the Latino community, how important it is for us to blend in, or not blend in, but also to integrate ourselves, to go farther, to learn the language, to not be afraid, to communicate with others, to be open, because it can be intimidating. Because you could get it from different sides of the spectrum, and it's hard. So I'm very proud to say that everything that I have done professionally, it has been done with the intention of empowering my community so they can feel more confident when they navigate their lives here in America. And I shouldn't have to do that, but that's the world that we live in. And like we talk about today, Jay, I have realized with the time that I have been living in the South for 16 years that I have conversations with my kids that probably are not going to be the same conversations that you're going to have with your kids. And that a lot of people is raised they're raised out of fear, because they have to be given these talks, and their parents have to talk to them and protect them in a certain way. So they learn to be on a defensive mode all the time. And and that's when sometimes African Americans can come up as a very strong and race, because you guys are strong, you're confident, you're strong, you have this power within yourselves. And for us, at least for me as a Latina, sometimes that's intimidating, not because I'm afraid, but because it's intimidating. Okay. So I think that is so important to have these conversations, because when we start to see what the other person sees, then we can understand. Then we can open our minds to what we're doing as well. So I think that's it's great that we're having this conversation, and I hope that this is not just a thing that because of what happened, we're doing. No, I think that the important thing for our kids, for the future generations, is to keep having these conversations as often as possible, until we can create this world, until we can create at least this society in which we don't have to have these different talks with our kids and teach them how to conduct themselves and how to talk to a police person. So that's what I think. We have to empower. If we have any position in the community, that's my thing. If we have positioned ourselves in a community, in a profession, or with a platform that allows us to reach out, we have to empower and to give our communities the confidence that they need to deal with other people that are different from them. And know that integrating themselves with others is a powerful thing. That's the way that I see it. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Maui. And I'm going to open it up with my first question. And I'm going to hop off the screen in a minute. I'm going to bring Iffy in, Miles, and Kanika, and PJ as well, to talk about this first question. Maui brought up something extremely interesting and powerful with regards to intimidation. She said that, oftentimes she was intimidated by Black people. Have any of you experienced intimidation from an African American person? And then we see, police officers saying, I felt like my life was in danger, so I had to shoot this gentleman and ultimately kill him. Have you ever experienced that feeling of like your life was in danger or intimidated by an African American person, whether it male or female?
Are you asking one of us directly a question?
Yeah, you guys go ahead. I'm going to be moderating, so you guys go ahead and answer that question.
I think it's open for anyone to.
I'll jump in.
I'll jump in. Yeah, the white people are going to jump in here.
You get the white perspective first. Go ahead.
I don't feel like I should be leading this conversation.
Go ahead,
Here, fine, I'll start.
That's a really good question. Okay, so you're asking, hey,
man, she jumped in and jumped out.
Oh, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I get it.
Okay.
No, you're.
So the question was, have we ever felt intimidated by Black people, right? So is there some sense to what, all these phone calls to the 911 are, is there some sense to that? I think I can say definitely I have felt intimidated by my fellow Black people at times, but I will go to say that a lot of that feeling is a feeling of fear. And fear is a learned trait. You weren't born afraid, right? You learn it. And you learn it from what you expose yourself to. So if you watch television, which 99% of it is garbage, but if you watch television and you see a Black boy in a hoodie always portrayed as the killer always wears a hoodie and he's always Black and he has a weapon. If you watch enough of that type of television, you will believe that the next time you see a Black person in a hoodie at nighttime, he's probably a killer, like the character I saw on television. It's just the truth. We are all products of our environment. So what I did was I sold my television, okay? Because you really have to think about, like, how do I fix all of the stuff that I'm being taught that is irrational fear? So I had to step away from that and ask myself, and this is when I first came to the United States, because I used to watch all the TV. So it was all, people are getting shut up on television, the rappers are always in this or that. I used to watch all of that when I lived in Portugal. So when I moved here, I was told, be careful, okay? Like at nighttime, like, don't go out because you may, and if a Black person steps to you, run away, that's the kind of training that I got prior to coming to the United States. So of course, I think watching terrible television, plus, coming from a family that watched the same terrible television, I had this irrational fear of Black people. But then again, as a whole, people in general scare me because people no longer have moral compass, or maybe they never had. So it's not just do Black people intimidate me, people all around.
And yeah, to kind of jump off of Iffy's point there, I mean, it's something that's learned you learn it so young, and it takes years and years and years to undo that. And I think, hopefully my fellow white people are on that journey now to start realizing and understanding that is so ingrained in us when we were so little. I was thinking back to some of the movies that I've watched and some of the actions that my parents did when I was younger that, trained me to be this way. And, little things like we drive past a neighborhood and there's a Black man standing on the corner, lock your doors. I watched Lion King growing up, the bad lion had darker fur. I mean, it's just subtle things that you learn so young. And I don't, we're not taught about Black history as much as we should be. We're not required to take, 3 years in high school of Black history, which we should be. And it's things we just don't know until you know, things like this happen with George Floyd, and we start to hopefully unpack it as white people and examine ourselves that we are a part of the problem. Whether you're, you know, you're an overt racist or, you know, a covert racist, and it's very subtle. They're just things that you're learned growing up. So.
Yeah, you know, jumping back into it, you know, on behalf of the white people in the conversation, I can say I'm more scared of white people and all black than I am of black people, or, you know, African American descent. I'm a white person that chose to spend most of my life around, you know, African American people and black people. My best friend is black. Most of my friends are black. But that was a choice I made. And, you know, I've been in all the quote unquote dangerous neighborhoods in America. And to be honest, like, as long as you're, you know, mind your business and do what you want to do, people don't mess with you. You know, I'm much more scared of old white men in, you know, suits than I am a young black man, just because that's what they show on television. You know, I'm not scared of Mexican people because of the show Narcos. You know what I mean? Like, I think that television and the news have tried to do a really good job of painting a picture of what certain races are or what they do. But once you actually spend time in these communities, you realize that just like any other community, there's going to be bad people, there's going to be good people. It has nothing to do with race. Nobody's born evil. You know, that's something that's taught and something that's learned. And, you know, no one's born racist. That's also something that's taught and learned. And, you know, again, I think dialogues and conversations like this one is what is so necessary to break through those barriers of, you know, perceived evil is what I would call it.
Yeah, and you know, piggyback that, you know, growing up, I definitely had, you know, aunts that intimidated me, but it wasn't because they were black. It was because they were 5'11", 300 plus pounds. So, you know, I just have like a different perspective. You know, I have people that intimidated me, but they just so happened to be black, and it wasn't necessarily because of their skin. It was just because how, you know, they were acting, what they were saying, something they were doing that, you know, was intimidating to me. I'm really into horror movies and like cop shows and things like that. And when you look back on, you know, through history, you know, the people that were, you know, chopping up people and eating people, most serial killers, like, you know, they don't look like me. This guy. But, you know, so, you know, I just have a different perspective. You know, I grew up in, you know, I was born in Compton, so I definitely was surrounded by African American people, a lot of, you know, Latinos in my life. I grew up around a lot of Asian people at one point, and, you know, you're supposed to be intimidated by people with tattoos and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, big muscles and all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, that's how everybody I grew up around looked like, and not all my interactions with those different types of people were terrible. So I don't look at that kind of stuff and think that this person automatically is intimidating, because some of the biggest, you know, guys that I know that I grew up around that were like, you know, 6'2", 250 solid muscle were some of the biggest teddy bears that I've ever met in my life. So I don't know. I guess I just look at it differently.
I grew up in Pomona.
You know, in a lot of sense.
You're gonna go.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
I grew up in Pomona, and all my peers were either Mexican or black, so I never had any intimidations or feelings of being intimidated by any black person. My family actually told me, like, as I was growing up, they talked more about Dr. Martin Luther King more than anything, and I always idolized him. So instead of like fearing them, I actually like attracted, like I felt like an attraction towards like the black community more than anything. And like my friends were black and Hispanic. I was like 1 out of 2 Asians in school, so I never had that problem. The only thing that I was afraid of was like the white community, because my family would always talk about how, you know, like if you do something, like you got to be careful because they can discriminate you for that. Like make sure you act right and proper when you're around people, so then they don't have a reason to discriminate you. So it was always about more towards the white culture than it is for the black, for me.
So what I'm gonna say is, you know, if we go back and look and think of all the history, let's, you know, for over 400 years, we as African Americans had to be quiet, mealy mouth. When we are an emotional and expressional, and sometimes people take us for being loud, boisterous, and but just fun-loving group of people. So where I think she might have been felt intimidated was just actually us finally getting the position in this world where we could be free to express ourselves. You know, we quick to yell at somebody across the street or give a heads up, and sometimes it's after being suppressed for so long, and always, especially around white people, that you gotta watch your mouth, watch your tone, don't look them in the eye, keep your head down. So it honestly hasn't been to the last 50 years that we were actually able to release that inner voice. And that's what you're coming out. It's like this, look, we're here. We got this freedom. We got this, you know, this is us. This is our culture. This is our yes, you have suppressed us. The system has suppressed us for so many centuries, but we are finally free to be us and be how we are. As a native New Yorker, when you have 20 million people in a small area, you got to be loud to be heard. And when you grow up in large families, you have to be loud to be heard to get some attention. Sometimes, even if it's just to get something to eat, if it's to get a hug from mama, because daddy may be working all the time and it's never shown, was never openly expressed on how to love, that you're always fighting for that attention. You're fighting for that I am an alpha male. I am a lion. Hear me roar. Just like, I want to say what her name is, Kanika. She said, you know, some of her people in her family is 6'2", 250 pounds, are some of the biggest teddy bears. Yeah, come up to me. Give me a hug, laugh with me, joke with me. But if people take the time to not let the media dictate their perception of African Americans actually come in, I mean, Ashley will tell you, when we are
Did he freeze right when I'm supposed to say something?
Yeah, I think so.
I was waiting to see what story he'd tell. I'm a little nervous.
Hey, let me
at work.
Jason, can you go back? You froze. We missed what you said.
All right, PJ, MJ, we haven't heard from you, and Shami. You guys take it over. Go ahead.
Let me take. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Let me take Jay Wu on for a second. I've never been afraid of Jay Wu, and I should be, but in my life, and I've known him for 25 years, the moment I saw him, we fell in love. And it was because by that time, at least in my life, I had decolonized my mind. I had, in a sense, liberated my mind from all of the fraudulent information that we are all fed. And so part of what I would say to you all is, and I'm just going to be blunt, I think you all are swallowing some of the Kool-Aid yourself. And so, for example, what I mean by that is that when we start with a conversation where we gaze towards are black men dangerous, what we're not gazing towards is, are police dangerous? Are white men dangerous? Are the real predators dangerous? Because black men are not dangerous. They are black. They are men who are black. And so there is no disproportionate violence by black men. And in fact, we've already demonstrated it's quite the opposite. And so I think part of it is that we have to realize that we should be scared to death of white supremacist police, the military, etc., and the president of the United States. And so we need to shift our gaze and attention towards not giving what I call murder porn now. We all get off on Black Death. You know, bad boys, hip hop, all of that shit is meant to desecrate Black life. And so we have to shift our gaze towards the love that Black men have held on this, you know, have held for this country since its inception. I'm done. Jay Wu, what you got on that?
Yeah, Jason.
I completely agree with you. No, I completely agree with you. You cannot let, no one should ever allow the media to dictate their image of somebody else. If you really want to get to know them, if you want to know what's going on with that group, get to know somebody in that group. Get out and get instrumental in that, within that group. Be transparent. One thing that we realize and that we recognize quick is when somebody is fake, when somebody's coming with an ulterior motive. So if you're not going to come to us real, then yes, you're correct. We are going to defend that circle, because as our circle grows larger every day, it was so much of it that was taken away from us and not allowed to us for different reasons. Yes, but as long as you are real and you're authentic, we're going to welcome you in no matter what.
So I have a couple different thoughts on that. I wouldn't say people don't intimidate me. I'm just not I don't know, regardless of their race. I went to, so when I was in the motorcycle industry, we did an event in Austria, and the guys who put it on were the Hells Angels. So myself and my coworkers showed up in, it's called Lake Faak. It's F-A-A-K. And it's a really cool motorcycle rally that they do there. And we showed up and we had dinner with the Hells Angels with two giant white dudes who were tatted from pretty much head to toe. And the one had a little wiener dog that he carried around in his arm all night. And he was not intimidated. I mean, obviously they're big. They could have killed us. They could have killed us and thrown us in the lake and nobody ever would have seen us again. And that would have been the end of MJ right there. But they weren't. And I don't see them as any more intimidating than a Black man, than an Asian man, than anyone. And I think a lot of it is things that I would totally agree that the media has made, I don't own a TV, and I have not owned a TV my entire adult life. So I'm not infiltrated by a lot of the mainstream information that, that we take in as adults. I read a lot of stuff. I don't even really like to watch like news videos. I do most of my stuff through reading, because I feel like you can be a lot more objective through reading articles. But I will say that the media and the entertainment business has definitely glorified this like scary Black man image. So that's a huge hindrance, I would say. I would say that stereotype is true. So when I moved away from my hometown, I lived in Milwaukee for about 8 years, and I had friends back from West Bend, Wisconsin, who were terrified to come visit me in big, scary Milwaukee and would not leave their hometown to come down and visit. I'm like, really, guys? It's not a scary, terrifying place. You're not going to get robbed or mugged or shot or whatever you've conjured up in your mind as a terrified person from the suburbs / rural-ish America. And then I think my other thought too, though, I don't fear our police. And I saw what happened when we didn't have police presence for 2 nights in Minneapolis, and my city got burned to the ground. So I think in a civilized and just society, we need police officers, but we need police officers who aren't corrupt, and they need to realize that they are still public servants. And I think a lot of that has been lost. So I'm not anti-police. Growing up, my mom, we would go to the library and there would be police officers out front, and I got baseball cards from the cops as a kid. So I don't fear the police, and I respect the police. And every time that I've been pulled over, it was because I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing, and I will own up to that. But I do think that there is a lot of, brotherhood that goes on, and just corruption. And I'm fairly anti-union to begin with, but I do think that the police union is definitely something that should be really, really heavily reviewed, because it protects a lot of officers that may be doing things that they should not be doing as public servants. So when you look at Derek Chauvin, this guy had a record a mile long of aggressive incidents and things that he was doing as a police officer that you would not want to have in someone who is supposed to be, quote unquote, serving and protecting their community. So this is, in my mind, someone who well, really shouldn't have been on the police force any longer, but at least should have had an office job and not be out in the public and, you know, and harming the people that he was supposed to be protecting. So I will say, like, yes, we should fear corruption in our police department, but I would say that we shouldn't fear the police as a whole.
Can I make a point? And I want to touch base on something that I think it was Miles that said, and then PJ kind of echoed about kind of unlearning everything that you've learned. I think, you know, it sometimes sounds simple to say that people should just go out and learn about other races and learn about other cultures, and it feels and it sounds very linear. But as someone who is not from America, who had to learn about America from, and I'll give you guys some context. I went to private school, right? So if I'm in Portugal, I'm in private school. I'm one of like the 3 Black people in private school. Okay. When I was in Venezuela, I was in private school. One of like the 3 or 4 Black people in private school. Same for Canada, same for UK, same for everything. So there has to be a level of understanding that people, myself included, have been fed information. So you're talking about children from the age of kindergarten all the way till 12th grade. At what point do they start breaking out of that shell? That's why we're having conversations like this, right? To catch them now. But at what point do they start breaking out of that shell? Is it when they're in the 6th grade or in the 7th grade? Or is it the 8th grade when they're still being told what to do, how to think? The television is showing them everything. Their friends are all being taught the same rubbish. I think that we have to understand that everybody doesn't come from the same background. So we can't expect that their learning experiences are all going to be the same. Black Americans that have lived in America all their life have a completely different experience than immigrants that moved to America and only saw America on Netflix or on Hulu. And every time, and Black people, we don't make it easier for ourselves, because the people we're looking up to, listening to their music, they're making trash music. They're making music that only goes to show or goes to perpetuate this terrible stereotype about Black people. The leaders of that industry aren't making it any better. So I think it's a conversation that has to be had from, where is our attention? When we find out where Black attention is, you have to hold those people to a certain standard and say, hey, listen, people are rocking to your music. So if you want to call yourself amigos or whatever you want to call yourself, just know that you have influence. So if you have people's attention, what are you teaching them? Because they have more influence than you and I. And that's just a hardcore truth. So that's just the way I think as it pertains to that. I think accountability from Black people is the first step.
Kanika, Mouse, you guys want to respond to that? If you do, go ahead. And then Shameen, I want you to jump in on that as well.
Sure. Kanika, do you want to respond? Or?
Yeah, I definitely, didn't go to private school, at nothing close to it, but, I was labeled one of the gifted children growing up. So I was always placed in magnet programs, and in high school, I was in AP classes and honor classes and all that kind of stuff. So, in middle school, when I transitioned into going into a magnet program, I could count all the Black kids in our entire school on 2 hands. And when I was in AP classes in high school, there was only, less than 5 of us in a class in any of my classes. And so, I think that another conversation that needs to be had amongst the Black community is if, when you speak a certain way or you carry yourself a certain way because, you were exposed to a different education experience, sometimes, you get called out by the other African Americans and say, oh, well, you talk white, or you, and the name calling, you're Oreo, you're Black on the outside and white on the inside, because, you could put together a sentence. And it's like, when you occupy predominantly white spaces, then you have to carry yourself in a certain way in order to be accepted, because colorism very much plays a part into that. And I find in my personal experience throughout my life that because, I'm a dark-skinned woman, then people automatically assume that I can't put together a sentence properly, and that I'm uneducated, or that I'm automatically ghetto, or things like that. And it's like you didn't even give me a chance to have a conversation with me before you just automatically assumed all this stuff about me. Like, what? Let's have a conversation. And I think that in this day and age, especially where we're at in society with everything that's going on right now, it's important for people who aren't exposed to different cultures to have that conversation. And if you are more enlightened than your friends or your family members to what's going on in the African American community, then it falls upon you, and it's your responsibility to check your family members and check your friends when they say racist things or bigoted things or things that are biased. Like, it starts with each and every one of us. I have friends that I've been friends with for years, and they may say something slick, and I'm like, "Hey, hold on, what do you mean by that? Let's talk about it. Like, what you just said wasn't cool." And so I think that just moving forward, we have to hold our friends and our family members accountable for the things that they say, and how they view people, not even just in the African American community. If you feel like they're biased against Latinos or Asian Americans or whatever, it's each one of us is our responsibility to hold our friends and our family members accountable.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and kind of replying to my part of that, I had pretty much the opposite experience of my wife growing up, in that I was special education most of my life, or in the special educated at IEP, all that. Sixth grade was basically labeled a troublemaker. So I was in all the quote unquote troublemaker classes. And for whatever reason, basically was pretty much the only white kid in all those classes. So grew up kind of, again, opposite, where my family and friends outside the school were certainly white and, from white background, but my friends at school were this really diverse group of people. So what I tried to do was just kind of bridge the gap between the two. I was the kid that was dressing up, getting called names, saying I acted black or I talked black or whatever. And, I'd say to people, like, how do you talk a certain race? I never got that. How do you talk black? How do you talk white? How do you talk Mexican? How do you, whatever. And as I got older, I realized that because of my skin color, I did have the privilege to have those conversations that in certain areas that people wouldn't be allowed to. Unfortunately, my friends who are black couldn't go into certain rooms to have those conversations. So what I tried to do was really bridge the gap, working with nonprofits, working with a nonprofit in San Diego called Paving Great Futures, which is just a group of, great guys from Southeast San Diego who essentially have made it a mission to work with the youth, but not do it in a way to where we're lecturing them and telling them, nah, you're wrong. Don't listen to hip hop music. Don't listen to this. Don't do that. Don't gangbang, don't do whatever. It's more so, why are you doing these things? And also, here's some alternative options for things you can do. Here's some after school programs, or, they work with the San Diego police force and actually create programs where they bring rookie officers into the neighborhoods that they're actually going to be patrolling, so they can build up a level of comfort with those neighborhoods, which is something a lot of police forces don't do. So, I think the rhetoric of, again, and I'm completely empathetic to people that come to this country and don't understand this part of it. But, I think blaming music and film and stuff like that, it just doesn't go for me. And I used to work in the music industry, so maybe that's why I'm saying that. But, I think at the end of the day, it starts at home. I don't think blaming, certainly music artists have influence, but at the end of the day, we got to talk to our kids and we got to talk to our neighbors and, the people we're responsible for, and let them know, like, hey, just, it's like watching a Denzel Washington movie. Just because he plays a dirty cop in Training Day doesn't mean he does that in his spare time. It's just it's explaining to them that there's that very thin line between the arts and reality. And at the end of the day, you still got to live in that reality.
That's right. Or you can get rid of your television like MJ.
You could certainly do that, but I'm not going to tell people to do that. So people can do whatever they want.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
You got to make it do what it do.
All right. Shameen, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
So you guys touched on a lot of really great subjects. I mean, one of them is colorism in all of our communities, and it's, I got to take this out. What I know I see in the Hispanic community and he's in the Hispanic diaspora, since my family my father's family is Puerto Rican. We have African, Puerto Ricans of African descent who are more Black presenting and more lighter skinned folks. I happen to be one of those people that are either, too dark to pass or too light or too light. So I've had it both ways, and I see my privilege for being a little bit more light skinned, but I also have suffered because I'm not perceived a certain way either. I have, and when we talked about before how we perceive Black men, I've never seen Black men as being scary or imposing. I've had more grief and more issues with white people, gangs of white men. When I was in Switzerland, I was attacked by a group of neo-Nazis. We all experience these horrible things, and it's how we deal with it and how we overcome it. I was thankfully, I learned to be able to handle myself and try to diffuse the situation or try to walk away as best I can. But at the same time, even with this George Floyd thing, why should we be quiet? Why should I walk away? Why should I keep, be a silent person? And Kanika, talking about education, it's like how we have to code switch all the time. In my professional life and with a lot of my white friends, I'll speak one way, and then when I'm really comfortable at the kitchen table with my other friends, I can start talking in slang, and having to show yourself a certain way to certain groups to not be perceived as being unintelligent or unprofessional. Kanika, like you, I was in the gifted programs and the AP programs, and I was in a very low income area in Queens, New York, and very, very low income. And one of the things I remembered when my father, who happens to be was in the military at the time, I'm an Army brat. We had the income to move into a nicer neighborhood so I can go to high school in a good high school where I can flourish and hopefully go to college at that point in time. One of our neighbors saw my father moving in and looked at him like, "Oh, are you Hispanic?" And my father said, "Yes, I'm Puerto Rican." And the gentleman turned and he said, "How do people like you afford to live here?" And that was really striking. I was 13 at the time. I didn't quite understand. I just thought, wow, that's kind of an odd thing to say to somebody. And then of course he saw my mother and, he was horrified, that, this Hispanic man married an Asian. And then like into your families and how you work with your families. I have a very, as diverse as my family is, my Hispanic side of the family has that whole white Black thing in, and the light skinned Hispanics and the dark skinned Hispanics. And, a lot of us don't communicate anymore because we have that racial divide. It's not my place to educate, to make someone sit there and be educated. I can ask them, we can talk, but once they have decided that, the darker skinned people, or, using worse words, are awful, that's when you turn your back from them. And I've actually turned my back to my cousins who actually are in the New York Police Department. So, it's really frightening growing up in families that this can occur. But we have to, look at each other and all come together and think about, how can me, with my privilege as being, I guess, light skinned, I don't know. As a friend sent to me the other day, there was a point when I would go on vacation and I'd come back really dark because everybody loves the beach. I came back really dark, and he said, what he said? He said, "Are you trying to get profiled?" And that was actually a really striking thing. He said this to me the other day of his thoughts, and it was really striking to me because every time I got onto an airplane, I got profiled. And I remember once, because I did a lot of flying in and outs for work, I asked them, "Why do you continually give me the secondary search?" And it basically said, "I fit the profile of a drug mule because people like me shouldn't have so many expensive things." Wow. Tell me how much that really hurt. It's so painful because we all are here just trying to live our lives. And just to be told that we're not supposed to have something because of the way we look or the color of our skin. It's really, really painful. And another instance of, again, driving while colored. I was in Florida driving with a friend of mine who happened to be Saudi Arabian. He was quite rich, so he's never had any altercation with the police. And we got pulled over for no reason other than the obvious. And I remembered I was arguing with him to put his hands on the steering wheel. He couldn't understand why I said, please put your hands on the steering wheel. I don't want to die today, you know? And he couldn't believe it. And, you know, the officer came down and basically said, you know, you started from the full stop pretty fast. We were going like 3 miles an hour, so it 0 cents. That was his first time that he was racially profiled. So it's a crazy experience out there. We all need to figure out how we can have these conversations with our kids, our friends, and see how we can move forward. But you know, it all starts at home. It all starts with our families, and colorism is a thing within our various races.
As we speak.
All right. Let's bring in, thank you, Shameen, for sharing that. Let's bring in Ashley. What are your thoughts on what you're hearing right now?
I mean, I agree with a lot of it. I mean, my perspective, I grew up in an all-white neighborhood. My parents are obviously white. All of my family's white. There's no diversity in my family. Friends are all white. I grew up in a white high school. I grew up with zero diversity. You know, and again, I've mentioned that Minnesota is racial integration is a problem there. So I think you're afraid of what you don't know, and maybe not even what you don't know, what you don't experience. And so, you know, I agree that it's something that's learned at an age. I think there's truth to all of it, and that the media that we consume, but also the things that, you know, the Black community, they teach their family things that they have to be careful for. And when they run into a cop, put your hands on the wheel. We weren't taught that stuff, and we weren't taught that Black people had to go through those things. So it's the lack of teaching. And you know, my parents are still together. My parents, you know, love me and adore me, and they want the best for this world, and they want peace and everything like that. But you realize that's not enough. And it does. It starts with the family, and it starts early on. And, you know, they didn't teach me those things. And that's why, you know, I'm a part of the problem. You know, I'm not someone who's racist. I wouldn't consider myself racist, but it's the subtle things that you're either taught or not taught. And those, you know, that's years and years of damage to undo. And that's hard to undo. And I hope this George Floyd case is, again, you know, making white people look at themselves and how they were raised, and how that they can raise their future generations. I don't have kids. You know, one day I hope to have kids, but is that something that, how can I start young and teach those kids what not to do, and teach them about, you know, different cultures and what they go through on a daily basis?
Let me jump in. What's really exciting to me tonight is the movement that is emerging around the globe is not actually about Black and white people. It's not. It's about this singular form of oppression that Black men have withstood for centuries, and that has, in a sense, now reverberated across all forms of oppression, right? So if to be queer on the streets is to be Black on the streets, to be a transgender person on the streets, to be anyone on the streets that's not white is to be Black, is to be oppressed. But here's the rub. If we only keep our gaze on that issue, what we fail to see is that we are all in an intersexual and intersectional relationship with each other that transcends what we look like. Let me say this. I when I looked at y'all, sorry, I got a nose issue. When I looked at y'all, I said, well, I couldn't figure out who was white and who was black. I'm like, miles can pass, you know, a few y'all, I'm not sure. But the point is, and here's the other thing. Guess what? I'm 1/8 black. My great grandmother's black. And so, needless to say, we all have a different way of being in relationship to this. I think the theory of change that black lesbian women have added is this new theory of intersectionality, and that the oppressions that are intersecting within us need to be projected with outside of us. And so that we have to have a new form of relating to oppression that's not singularly related to my experience as being black or as a disabled poor person. And so I think it's a new day. I'm old as fuck, y'all. I'm really, really excited that young people are jumping in. And I got a bloody nose. Shit.
All that pent up aggression.
All right, so
That's called passionate, man. He gave himself a bloody nose. Holy cow.
Hey man, that's PJ.
Passion.
That's PJ.
go ahead.
I do want to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jay. Wu. Tia,
No, I just quickly want to just say, Ashley, I'm not going to sit here and allow you to say that you're a part of the problem. I'm going to say you're a much larger part of the solution, because it comes from this. It's about when God blesses you to be a mother. And that's if you give birth to a child, if you adopt a child, or anything else. It is going to be your job to control what goes into their gates, what goes into their ear gates, their eye gates, and what goes into their soul and their spirit. You're going to have to protect that. But it's also going to be your job to ensure that they get out and get to meet people and get energized in different communities and not be insulated in their own community. Probably just for geographical limitations, because I've also spent some time in Minneapolis. It's a very small African-American population that's there. And I'm really gonna be honest with you, it's because it's too damn cold up there. So most of the time when I see people up there, especially when I see fellow black folks up there, I'm like, what are you running from? Because it's too cold up here. I was there at the Super Bowl when it was negative 30 degrees for a week. So, and that's the encouraging part. So, you've made that transition from lily white Minneapolis down here to what we call the Black Hollywood of Atlanta. And you've jumped in head first. I've never seen you put a post up of saying, that you were afraid to go to a neighborhood, you were afraid to go here. When I follow you on social media, you're everywhere. No matter what the community is, no matter what the makeup of the community is, you're there. So the fact that you have this passion that you want to integrate and actually learn, and not come in as if you know everything, but you want to come in and experience. And that's the key. It's not about making other people comfortable in your area. You come into my house. When you come into my house, come on in. I'm going to make you welcome, but it's not always going to be up to me to make you comfortable, because I'm not going to change what I'm doing over here. So, and that's what I appreciate about this conversation.
Mike, thank you, Jason, for that. Mike, do you want to jump in? MJ, you guys want to add your thoughts on that?
I remember when Kanika was saying how we should talk to our friends and not educate them, but talk to them about whenever they say something racist, or catch them when they say something that's discriminatory towards another ethnicity or race. I was reading. I know some of you are on my Facebook. I was reading about some of the posts and comments that I saw on some of these, because, as you know, one of the police officers in the case with George Floyd is Asian. and I was commenting, supporting like the post, but then I was reading the comments and I saw people talking about how, oh, look at that, like Corona eating ass person, blah blah blah. Why is he doing this? He's Asian, blah blah blah, and all Asians are like racist. And I'm like thinking in my head, like that's what they see. They assume that because they see like an Asian man, but that's not what the demographic of like Asians are. There's people like protesting in Japan for the case, and like there's plenty of Asians. My parents, like they're against like the move, like the thing that's going on right now, like I have family members that are against the police. Like we have experienced discrimination from police as well, so we understand like the case. So like it's I don't understand, like it's just so frustrating whenever I see like another person of color or minority like comment and say like, oh, like Asians are racist, or like they do this, or they do too much, when it's not true. Like it's just that isolated incident or that person. It's not like, you know, it upsets me, but like you guys, I don't know, like
No,
you guys get where I'm coming from?
You're pretty much saying that officer isn't the spokesperson for all Asians.
Yeah.
That makes sense. The same way you have to identify that there's a difference between a protest and a riot, but somehow in the media it's always used together in the same sentence, but it's two completely different things. So yeah, one bad cop isn't, you know, the spokesperson for the entire police academy, the same way one Asian isn't the spokesperson for all Asians. Yeah.
If you bring up a really good point, because I am 100% for people to peaceably assemble and exercise their First Amendment rights. I love that. I didn't participate in the march for George Floyd, but I did go and watch it, and what happened is atrocious on so many levels, and like he absolutely deserves justice. And I don't think that anybody should have to die in that way or to be brutally murdered in front of a store over a $20 bill. Like there's so many issues just with the case altogether. But yeah, and I think and the memorial site, I'll send you guys some photos later. It's amazing what people have done in that space. There are flowers everywhere. They've painted this, it's a beautiful mural and like a tribute to him. It's kind of like the healing grounds for the community. I've been there for sure 3 times, maybe 4. And there's like, people are grilling out and giving out free food and just like gathering together. And it's just, for all the pain and anger and destruction that the city has seen, it really is like a place of peace. But I do have a huge issue with the riots, and even today.
There's an earthquake going on. Sorry.
What was that?
An earthquake.
Oh, really?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we just had an earthquake here in Vegas.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's the riots that have happened and the whole.
And see, that's why I live on this coast.
We're coming down there soon.
That's why I live in the Midwest. Nothing bad happens. It's cold. It's really, really cold.
MJ, I just want to put this down here on this group.
So
I had to research this myself, but just because people really don't know the difference, right? Like a protest is a public expression of objection. A riot is a violent disturbance of the peace. Very separate.
Yes.
They are not synonymous.
Okay.
Oh, it's synonymous. It's actually not synonymous. It's completely
at all. It's not synonymous at all. You're totally right. And literally, I mean, the photos that I have, like the Walgreens that is a block from my house has been not only ransacked but torched. And the building's gonna have to be demolished. And I watched them tear down buildings yesterday on Lake Street. And what's really sad is that a lot of these businesses were either minority owned, immigrant owned, or like community people who are for everyone, right? Like they're for Blacks, they're for Asians, they're for whites, they're for community. And those businesses aren't going to come back. A lot of them didn't have insurance. I've been hearing it's hearsay at this point, but apparently you need actual riot insurance, which is like a rider that you put on of your insurance policy, and only every other business, or like most businesses don't have that, because most businesses aren't thinking that they're going to be destroyed during a riot. So the destruction and things that we have to recover from, I don't think that's what George Floyd would have wanted. And it's sad that that's that's what's happening. Like, I think he would want us to come together and obviously peacefully protest. Absolutely. Like, you can have your sign, you can march. We need to pass new laws. We need to get new people in office. I am 100% for that and for vocalizing that, but I'm not for the destruction of the community in the process.
I think the destruction that comes from. Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead, Jason.
No, okay. So I'm not for destruction of personal or private property, but in some sense, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you go for the protest, no matter what you do, it said not here. So you know, when you look at the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and in there, you know, it says, you know, you have the right to assembly, you have the right for your peaceful protest, you have the right to do this, this, and this. But the ultimate power structure is always telling you, I got you, but not here. I got you, but not here. No. So I'm free to do this at this point in time? Well, yeah, work. Sit down and shut up. You can't take a knee. So it's been years and years and years. And it's like, MJ, if I whispered your name, and if I don't ever think you're going to that you hear me, let's say you got your earbuds on, and then I yell at you, and you turn around and be like, why are you yelling at me? And I'm like, because I've been trying to get your attention and telling you that I'm frustrated, that I'm pissed, that I'm oppressed, that I'm not being treated fairly, and for all these different reasons. And every time that I try to do this peacefully, that I try to do it your way, I'm told, not here, not like that. You can protest, but don't do it on the Monday through Friday. Only do it. You know, it's almost like, and once again, it is to make the majority of white America comfortable. So if you really want to protest, you guys can protest quietly, have your silent protest at 2-3 o'clock a.m. Monday morning, but don't ever have more than 4 or 5 of y'all together, or we may have to call the police on you. Because when you do it peacefully, they could bring the police out on you. Just like in my other home state of Michigan, when you sit back and you have different groups that come up into the Capitol with AR-15 and assault rifles and so forth else. And it's never a sense of equality that comes across. So no matter how much you ignore a pot, no matter how much weight that you put on a group, that's eventually going to break. So what you're seeing, and I think the beauty of what you're seeing across the world, is the fact that different groups, you see a unification of different groups, because other groups are finally saying, oh shit, I might be next. See, if you let it happen too long to black folks, and then we end up getting pushed out the way, now they're gonna come for Miles, because Miles ain't gonna be able to pass no more, because we're gonna get him on his religion. Or we're gonna come for Mike, because Mike ain't gonna pass no more, because we don't care how much the Asian community is spending with us, or the homosexual community is spending with us, we still ain't gonna tolerate that. You know, it's like here in Atlanta on 10th and Peachtree, 10th and Piedmont, you know, that's a predominantly homosexual area. They had to fight to get a crosswalk painted with rainbows on each side. And each one, so instead of the white lines, there are rainbows that's going around there. And even when the coalition in the area said that they would pay for it themselves, the city still tried to fight them. See, we're dealing with a social problem, but it has really deep, hard economical roots. And the biggest piece that we're seeing right now, when we see the unification, when we see the protests in New Zealand, when we see the protests in Japan, when we see the protests around the world, because the rest of the world recognizes America as this quote unquote superpower, and they be damned if they want to be next. So they gonna tear it up right now. And when you oppress people that you are not investing in and giving something to, they like, fuck it. What do I got to lose? Yeah, that building is burnt down, but that business ain't been in my neighborhood all my life. I ain't never seen that business over there. When you got a grocery store, I've always had secondhand grocery stores all my life. So when you don't invest in these areas and you keep putting them down, that's eventually going to break and boil over. America is finally going to have to face its deep-rooted scars. We tired of picking the bad fruit. The world is finally saying, let's get to the root. And if it's going to, and unfortunately, if it's going to cost us some buildings and some things are going to have to be sacrificed to get to it, that is the price that we're going to have to pay, because we have gained so much on the back of oppressing other groups.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
I think
look, growing up in Detroit.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in with?
Yeah, PJ, jump in and talk while you're talking.
Jay and I have worked to organize social change for 25 years, and we've never been to a protest. We have to change our words. So, for example, I don't think we're in a protest. I think we're in an uprising. I don't think that there are riots. I think there is resistance. And so if you're at a protest, you're passive. You're yelling at a system that could give a fuck about you. But if you're in an uprising, you're assembling power to wield it in ways that the system can't afford. And so our terms matter. There is no one rioting except against us. When systems are overwhelmed with tanks and machine guns and bullets, by the way, I've been arrested so many times that my thumb is paralyzed. And yes, I have surged at police to protect a friend.
Love it.
But I am not a rioter. I am not a rioter. And so part of it is we have to realize the looting is not, by the way, you all have seen that there's some white folks doing this shit out front. And so we have to even, first of all, analyze where's the source, who's doing this. But then, by the way, if you're in New Orleans, and let's say you haven't had food for a month because the government hasn't gotten shit to you, and so you jump in the Target to get some food so you can survive, is that rioting or is that survival? So the words have to change.
Well, I would say here, I watched the news for like the live stream news on Friday night, and there were people just looting the liquor store. And I mean, I love a good drink, don't get me wrong, but it gave me a different perspective when I was like, is this really what we're doing? And the thing is, so like
MJ, let me just say, jail, and I've gotten out of jail a few times. The first place I go is to the liquor store.
Well, it's funny.
That's how it works.
Hey, MJ, look at it like this. There's no perfect system. It's not going to be we're never going to all be 100% in agreement on collective thought. The only time I think that the world may agree at the greatest amount of time is either the day of the week or the time that's on the clock. So you're going to have bad examples. The problem is it's not until the destruction starts to happen and that the violence, what the perceived violence starts in before the media gets there. And the media doesn't train that camera on you in a positive message, because they want to get out to other people in Utah, in Montana. They want to get out to other areas, a completely different image. They want to be able to put that image out there and control the narrative. And they sometimes won't even focus and delineate that who's doing the destruction. It's like anything else in the media. If it leads, it bleeds. And quickly, I would like to hear T's perspective on this as a former officer.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm on there.
Yeah, you
All
are.
right. So, as a former officer, it's even saddening to see this too as well, because as an officer, you have to deal with both climates. So, if you're an active officer right now, you're dealing with the climate of just say an African American officer. You're dealing with the climate of that. An African American was killed in the hands of someone that wears that same uniform that you are in, too, as well. So you have to weigh the two. So now imagine if you're a current officer and you have to weigh the two, and you have to go out there and fight against the looting, or have to stand as an officer and those who are protesting. So you're weighing on two edges right there, and I can't imagine what those officers are going through at the time. But to see that someone who is wearing that uniform, who holds, who swears and holds oath, put their right hand up and say that they're going to be accountable for wearing that uniform. And these people and the citizens trust this person to any type of situation that they are called on, that they're going to uphold the law equally. It's kind of it's something hard to swallow. And again, I just can't imagine what those officers are going through. But at the end of the day, with accountability, the officers have to be accountable, and that officers have to stand up against those type of officers that are on the force. And as we speak right now, there are officers who probably feel that was right. Those officers should be wearing the badge. And until we place the laws, we had to start with legislation and with the laws, a tougher law on officers who do those type of murders. They should, to me, I'm at the point where it needs to be the death penalty. It's automatically. That's how I feel. It should be automatic death penalty. It should be something that clicks in the mind to say, if I ever decide I took a human life because I have hatred in my eyes, hatred in my heart, it should be automatic death penalty. It should be no other way no gray area. It should be automatic death penalty. If you're gonna murder somebody wearing something that a trust up on the oath and behind a badge, to me, it should be the extent of the death penalty. Those laws will help. It won't stop, but it will help to fight against what we have, the inequality that we have here in America.
With regards to black and white, with regards to white police officers killing innocent black men.
That's correct.
But how do you fix the system if the system is corrupt in law enforcement?
Well, the system is corrupt in law enforcement. Again, it goes back to the legislation and laws that help kind of like maneuver those bad apples out of there too as well. It's not going to completely eliminate it, but it will move a lot of them out. Another strategy too is where we're having this conversation right here. If the people stand together, it will eventually overtake what the uprising of people coming together and standing for justice and say we're going to fight for equality. It's going to push for legislation to change. It's going to take a couple. To me, it's going to take a couple of years for this, but we have to be acting out and sow the seed now, so we can have it within a couple of years, that we can have laws that hold officers accountable for their actions. And that's another thing. That's another way. Again, we can fight this. It's so many other things I say that needs to be done, but as far as on officers and what they're doing, they have to be accountable, and they have to make laws more strict for officers who wear that badge.
So, as we begin to wrap up, I want to just finish up with one question tonight, and have all of you go around and give your thoughts and opinion on it. And hopefully we can have this conversation again to get to some of the other questions that we didn't get to answer. But I want to hear from all of you, and I want to know, what do you think needs to be changed? Is it a system that needs to be changed? Is it the people that need to come together? What needs to change for society to change the way in which Black men are viewed and racism and discrimination is viewed? So I'm going to take myself off, and I'm going to bring Mike in, and then we'll just start with MJ and then work our way back up and get everybody's thoughts on that.
So, man, that's a loaded question. Like, how do you solve all the world's problems? It's like kind of I think it's one step at a time. So there's a couple of things immediately, just as far as police accountability goes. I think what T said was good, just passing legislation that actually holds those people accountable. We don't have the death penalty in Minnesota. They abolished it. My guess is that they won't bring it back, but life imprisonment is something that's severe enough where these officers actually take the threat seriously, that if they are not killing in the line of defense, but killing because of hatred and malice and other things, that is taken as a serious crime, and it's not just brushed under the rug because of the protections that are in place for police officers. I think there's a community thing too. One thing that there's a big difference in different cultures, right? Like Black culture is different from white culture, which is different from Asian culture, which is different from Hispanic culture. There's just a lot of things that we don't know about each other. And we are finally in a world through social media and through the internet that we are so connected. I think we actually have the opportunity to really start to learn a lot more about one another. And it's got to start in our own neighborhoods. That's the coolest thing, honestly. Like, even though like my neighborhood has been totally toasted, like I walk out my door and go 2 blocks and like it looks like a war zone. It's still so surreal to me. But what's been super cool is that the community is coming together, and I've met people that I know I wouldn't have met otherwise, and I've heard their stories, and I've learned about them, and I've learned about things that they've experienced, and I've learned about different hardships that they've gone through. So now I feel like I'm getting to really truly know my neighbors and getting to know my community. So I think that's such an important thing that we're not necessarily always good at doing, because we all live busy lives. I mean, we've been kind of cooped up for the past couple months because of the COVID-19, but I think it's important that as we come out of this, we find ways to connect with other people, because it's got to be an internal thing where we say, like, as much as I'd love to change the world, like the best way to change the world is to change myself first. And I think that's the only way that things are really going to get better. And then 2, I think just like better education for police officers and how they deal with the community that they're involved with. I think there's probably a lack of training along with the accountability. So really coming up with, obviously there's Minneapolis has had several issues. I mean, Melanie Castile, Jamar Clark, and now George Floyd. So this is like an ongoing thing in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area with our police department. So there are other precincts in other cities across the country that probably have way better race relations. So why aren't we reaching out? Like, why don't we know those standards? What are some of the things that those communities, like, Ashley, you're from Minnesota, you know it's not super diverse. So like, what are this, like Milwaukee's actually got about a 40% African-American population. So like, why don't the people in charge in Minneapolis start reaching out to communities that are more diverse and figure out how their police force interacts with their communities of color? So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. Some of it's got to be legislation, some of it's got to be training, some of it's just got to be, within the community itself. So I don't have all the answers. I definitely need to look for more solutions and maybe hash some of those out some more, but I guess that's kind of where I'd start.
I agree with you, MJ. I think change does start with us, and racism is not just within the white community. Racism is within all the communities. Like, there's racist Asians, racist Hispanics, racist Blacks, racist whites. But this movement is here to like give us like a stepping stone so we can start rolling the ball and getting it to change. I feel like laws should be introduced. I believe like all cops should wear body cam so they can have evidence to like protect people whenever they do anything. There's cases where cops have planted items like drugs to frame people, and people like cities say that they don't have enough funding because the states aren't funding these programs, and because they don't have enough money. but United States is missing over $21 trillion that is not traceable. $21 trillion that's not traceable. That's ridiculous. You only probably need 1 trillion to even like buy these cameras for these police officers, but they're coming up with all these excuses as to why they don't want to do it. It's just very small things that they can do to make a huge change and get the ball rolling. And discrimination is not just within the police alone. Like it's everywhere. Like we need more change than just the police.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Iffy?
Yeah, I'm happy that we're ending with this question because it's you know, if people who do project management, what is the next action item is the thing. Like, what do you do now? Because we can all talk about it, but how do we make a difference? And like MJ said, I think the first way we make a difference as a whole is to make a difference by ourselves. I think as Black people and as a Black person, it's my duty to constantly learn more every day, learn what my rights are, learn who the people that make decisions are. A lot of people don't even know who the decision makers are in their states. They don't even know. They know the mayor's name, but they don't even know that it's not just the mayor. There's so many different branches of legislation that decide how you live on a daily basis. We need to get more interested in that information and less interested in all of the social jargon that's happening around us. And I think education, number one, is the first thing. Get educated, know who makes decisions in your city, and don't just speak. You know, it's a privilege to be an American and have the opportunity to vote. There are a lot of immigrants who would like to vote. Like they would like to cast their ballot and make a difference, but they don't even have that privilege. So I think that if you have so much privilege as Americans, you need to use it every opportunity that you get. And I also think that the leaders, the people who have the most amount of the Black American attention, need to use their powers for good. There's a lot of influencers that have zero influence on the real world. So stop listening to those people. Stop following those people. And actually, why don't you maybe follow people who make decisions so you can know who they are? And I say you because I can't vote. But if I could, I would. I already know who I'd be voting for. I've already Googled it and researched it. So I want people to be as meticulous with this information as I have been, and I'm not even an American. Number two, MJ mentioned training. I think training should be nationwide for the country. I think at this point, if the White House has to respond to the people, it's no longer a choice. No one's going to want you to keep burning down targets. That's for sure. So something has to happen. And I think it starts with nationwide training for police officers conducted by Black people. I don't think that a white person should come and teach white officers how to treat Black people or how to understand culture. So I think a training on cultural bias or race bias has to be had, led by Black people with white people as allies, to show a form of unity. And I think that's all I can say. Just change the narrative. At the end of the day, we have to tell the story of Black people. We can't keep letting the media instigate rubbish and keep falling into the traps of the media. I think we have to change the story.
Thank you for that, Iffy. That was good. That was powerful. Thank you for sharing. Jay Wu, what you think?
Man, it's a two-layer question. You want the perfect answer, or you want the realistic answer? Or which one you want first?
I want the realistic answer. The abbreviated realistic
answer. Oh, the realistic answer? Oh yeah, you look. I am my mother's motor mouth now. The realistic answer is starting with this conversation. One of my favorite books that I've read, that I like to share with folks. I don't know if you can see it, how well you can see it, but it's Dr. King's "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" So We can decide to hang together. We can decide to hang apart, but we all gonna hang. We all got to get through this. We have to be. We have to start with this conversation, and then we have to start getting involved in the system. If you can't rip up everything, then you have to change it. And in my opinion, part of my strategy is to change the system from the inside. You know, I vote every time that there's an election here, I participate in that election. Iffy, you may not be able to actually cast a ballot, but you can still be as instrumental in an election as I am casting a ballot. You can campaign for people. You can make sure that people get to the polls. You can show up. We have to start learning to be more proactive and less reactive. We have to start voting down ticket. We have to start demanding things, also more importantly, from those people that we vote for and that represent us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just, so many people feel disenfranchised. They feel like nobody is going to do anything for me. If I don't feel like I'm being heard, why should I show up to the polls? Why should I do this? It doesn't matter anyway. We have to find a way of giving people some hope, letting their voices be heard. And we also have to start rebuilding communities. We have to start building those neighborhoods. I hear everything about the whole training for police officers. Police officers training is fine. We have to start getting those police officers to live in those neighborhoods and know the people in those neighborhoods on a daily basis. I need to still be able to know Officer T or Officer Mike when they have their uniforms on or when they're just in plain clothes, and for them to be part of the neighborhood. That's been one of the biggest problems, is when you took the police officers out of the neighborhoods and you brought strangers in to control the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Officer's job isn't that, to almost have a military presence. So change the system from the inside, start educating yourself, start having more communications, and start investing capital in your neighborhoods to help build them up. That's the abbreviated version.
Well said, J. Wu. Well said. Shameen, we coming next to you.
Hey there, guys. The United States has such a varied history. We were taught that, I was making some notes earlier, we're taught that everyone in this country, has liberty and justice for all. Yet, time and time again, there have been laws enacted against people of color. From the Indian Removal Act, from the Chinese Exclusion Act, from the California Alien Land Act, from Executive Order 1066. Who can forget the biggest one, our Constitution, where a Black man was 3/5 of a man. So it's all ingrained in, I see you, it's all ingrained in our country from its very, very beginnings. We need to deprogram ourselves. As a person who has so many different races inside of me, and so many different cultures, I see it every day, and it kills me to know that if I was living in 1942 in this country, I would be put into an internment camp because I'm half Japanese. Not because of anything, it's just because the way my eyes are and my Japanese middle name, and my mother being a full-blooded Japanese. We weren't allowed to be citizens of this country. How messed up is that? During World War II, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, there was a movement called the No-No Boys. When they started internment of the Japanese, you were asked to answer a questionnaire, and there were two questions that were asked, and do you hate the United States, or would you fight for the United States? Well, when you just rounded up your entire family, your possessions left behind and then put into a horse stall to live somewhere in Wyoming or South Dakota when you're coming in from Southern California. How do you reconcile that? You know, and there were some that answered no to both, and they were deported. These are people who were born third generation Americans who were deported to Japan, didn't speak a lick of Japanese. And then the ones who answered yes, they became, these men who answered yes became one of the best fighting units in World War II, the 442. You know, they're one of the most highly decorated army units throughout that war. And, you know, and it's a testament to the Japanese people to be able to turn their cheek, so to speak. I don't think I would be that giving, you know, if I lived in that time. But it's just, we need to stop, again, when somebody said being reactionary. The United States have enacted laws time and time again being reactionary. The Chinese came in here to build our railroads. Oh my God, there's too many Chinese people now. Let's create a law to limit them. Japanese became farmers, right? Oh my God, they now own all this land. Oh, we need that back. So now they can't own land anymore. Oh, the Indians live on oil-rich land. Let's take their land from them with the Indian Removal Act. And they're still doing it today with Standing Rock. You know, this country and all of us here that are talking with each other today, we do need to vote. We need to instigate other people to vote. We need to have our voices heard. And I really like what PJ said before about uprisings and, you know, and using different words, because if I hear one more time, oh, aren't these protesters done yet? Aren't their message is, I really don't care anymore. Because we're utilizing the words protest. You know, we need to change the narrative, especially with what's currently going on now. It's hard. And you know what gives me hope is in 1969 we had the Stonewall riots, and that was a very big turning point for the LGBTQ community, led by Black men and women and transgenders and Hispanics, I should say, as well. 51 years later, this June, right now, if we didn't have coronavirus, we would have celebrations in the streets. You know, I would hope at some point in time that we can see a big celebration for Juneteenth. I would love to know I would love to also know that every white person in America knows what that is. You know, so I really do hope one day that we will get there. And I know that time is going to come soon, and it better come in our lifetime. If not, it'll come in our children's lifetimes. But we need to work, all of us together, in a concerted effort to make sure it happens in our lifetime and sooner rather than later. Thanks, guys.
Well said, Shameen. Well said. That was great. All right, Ashley, we coming to you next, and then Kanika, and then we gonna end with Mr. PJ. So, Ashley, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think needs to change?
Damn, how do I follow that? Okay. I, have been taking some notes, and hopefully not saying a controversial topic, but how do we start? We need to get rid of our president. He has clearly showed his racism, over the last few weeks, and I should say over the last few years, and it's absolutely disgusting. So that comes with voting in November, and getting him out of office so that we can start to build change. Some of the other kind of thoughts I had as people were talking, pressuring our leaders on a local and national level to kind of rethink and rebuild the system, as far as the, police brutality topic goes. Again, researching who you're voting for, and voting for those people that are going to stand up for the community, and the Black community. I think Jason mentioned it, but coming from Minnesota and Minneapolis, especially, the Minneapolis Police Department is extremely corrupt. This has happened many times before, and it's been swept under the rug. Those officers, majority of them come from all white suburbs. They travel into the city from all white suburbs and they have no experience with diversity. And again, they're afraid of the Black community. So this is not a surprise that this has happened, and that's horrible to say, but it's the truth. This is not surprising that someone who is white put his knee into the neck of a Black man in Minneapolis. So I think Jay Wu mentioned it, but focusing on hiring officers within their community and who have lived around that community is super important. Someone also mentioned body cams. Obviously that's important, and I think we need to be seeing what these officers are doing, especially if they're carrying a gun and they're in charge of someone's life. But I think it's super important for people to start recording things. If we did not have this video from an innocent bystander, this world would be making excuses for the death of George Floyd and that he deserved what he got because he was, breaking the law. We had a 12-minute video of him dying, 8 minutes with a knee in his neck. I mean, people need to start recording this stuff, and they need to start speaking out for it. And kind of along those lines of speaking out and standing up. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's kind of a part of my journey, if you will. I saw something out there that just said, white people do something, that, the Black community they're not listening to the Black community. White people a lot of times think, including myself, that this is not my place. This is white privilege speaking because, it doesn't personally affect me. So I have the privilege to, just ignore it. So when I saw that, white people do something, it was important for me to not stay silent anymore and to call out that covert racism. I think we're all sick of Facebook and the old white men, walking around or, posting around and posting their racism. And I think we need to start calling that out. It's exhausting to sit there and have a banter with someone you don't know on Facebook, but I think it's super important to start calling that out so people can see it and not ignoring it. But there's other ways to show up and not stay silent, protesting if you can do that, donating if you can, educating yourself and your family, and, and just realizing that the Black community doesn't need saving. I think someone might have mentioned that as well, but, they don't need saving. They need you to show up. So that's what I'm hoping that I can do, and then start the conversation and be a part of the conversation and help my white family and friends realize as well. So that was a shortened version.
Yeah, so, to piggyback that in what so many others said, I think that, the police brutality, even though the spotlight is being shown on that right now, systemic racism feeds into so many different avenues of our life. You have the police brutality and the unfair treatment of African Americans by the police is one aspect. In the medical industry, I'm 20 weeks pregnant right now, but Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. And once you explain away, we're talking about the same city, same socioeconomic level, same education background, same everything across the board. I'm 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than the white lady in the next room next to me. When you look at, the education system, and you look at, schools that are predominantly Black and brown in poor neighborhoods, their test scores are lower, and it's because, they don't have the funding in those schools that they have in the schools in the predominantly white areas in the nicer neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. When you look at home values and, why are houses in Compton so much less expensive than the houses that are in Long Beach, which are is 20 minutes away. It's, it's because, Long Beach is a predominantly white community and Compton is not. And when you going further into that, that brings up generational wealth. When, you have aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa dies and leaves a house to their offspring, you're going to get a very much smaller amount for that house in value than your white counterparts. And so, so that brings in a whole nother aspect. And when you look into, loans for business loans. You African Americans, they get approved at much lower rates than any other race. So, even though police brutality is where the spotlight is held right now, there's so many different avenues of systemic racism that play a part into our everyday life that people don't really think about. And so, when they say there needs to be an overhaul of the system, there's so many different systems that are set up for African Americans to fail that all that stuff needs to get looked at, not just the one.
Yeah, definitely adding on to that. I think for me, it's about accountability, and especially accountability for the people that are quote unquote paid to protect us. I have family members and friends who are police officers, not family and friends that are gang members. And only one group of those hold each other accountable when they fuck up, and it's not the police officers. So, that's a major problem. The police are a gang. Let's call it what it is. It's a group of people that wear the same uniforms, follow the same beliefs and stand for each other. It's a gang. Let's call it what it is. And, I have family members I've told that to, and, it's what it is. So until they hold their gang accountable, then it's not going to work out. That's step one. Step two, I think, and this goes to the quote unquote white allies out there, is we got to hold ourselves accountable. It's not enough just to sit there and point a camera at a man being kneeled on. Use your white privilege and get in there and knock the officer off. And guess what? You might go to jail that night, but hey, you did what you're supposed to do. You want to say you're part of the movement, then be a part of it. That's the second part of it. And, lastly, I think going kind of what Kanika said is the education aspect of it. We really need to do a better job of just pushing education through all the school districts and all the school systems and at home, and, teaching financial education and teaching, lessons from all different people, not just sports players or music artists or, stuff like that. It needs to be lessons from everyone that could be applied to daily life and then taken on. So they are, people are interested in becoming politicians and making the change from within. I've seen a lot of stuff on my timeline the last few weeks in Facebook, especially where, people are talking about this Target getting burned down in Minneapolis. The first Target got burned down, and admittedly being reactionary, but I said, and hopefully I don't ever do marketing for Target, what I'm about to say, but fuck Target. Like, a man lost his life. I could care less that Target got burned down, to be honest with you guys. And, I think that's a reality that a lot of us need to say to ourselves first is, there's a reason that people are angry right now. This is something that's been going on. And when it is that kind of that violence porn that exists, where you have 10 people filming this man with a knee on his neck, of those 10 people, someone could have put the camera down and done something about it. Hey, again, not suggesting attacking police officers. They have a job to do too, but we need to have these conversations and start that dialogue up. So that's what I got.
Target didn't get burned down, by the way.
Oh, sorry, looted.
It did get looted, yeah.
All right, PJ, you have the floor. You're going to end it tonight for us. What do you think needs to change?
Well, first I wanted to say thank you. To be in this conversation is to breathe and to feel hope, and to not despair. The book that Jason's holding, the premise is we can live together in harmony or we can perish as fools. And I think I would have adjusted the title by Dr. King to say, we can live together in harmony just as we perish as fools. And so we are in solidarity among the few of us here from very different backgrounds, while there are parts of our country that are perishing. And so I think there's a few lessons for me. First of all, I wanted to say, I came into Camila's house and I acted out in her living room. I'm sorry that I cursed and you told me not to. And so so if I say bump, if I'm about to say bump a few times.
Now go ahead.
Instead of the word that you know it is. Okay. Go ahead. So every time I say bump, you know what I mean.
Now go ahead.
So I got you. I'm gonna say it. Bump America, all the way. When I was young, we had this thing that said the roof is on fire. We don't need the water. Let the motherfucker burn, 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 burn. And so the point is we have to decolonize our imagination, right? We're citizens of a country that's never existed and may never exist in fact. We're citizens of a globe and a country we actually still have to create. We got to jump in, like get up, get out, jump the bump, in. And so what does that look like? Well, first of all, here's what's really beautiful. It's Camilla and Miles. I'm going to pick on you for a second. Can you tell me what the identity of your child will be? Can you tell me what it means in 20 years to live in this country? When I walk out the door, my partner's Taiwanese. I try to go do a racial inventory and I'm like, whoa, holy shit. I live in a country that doesn't look like me and it doesn't look like anyone. It's a beautiful place. So we're citizens of a country that our children get to inherit from us and create. And so we're birthing children into this new reality. Second is we have to let go of this country. We can't just put Trump in timeout, because if we put Trump in timeout, Uncle Joe ain't gonna do shit. I promise. He ain't gonna do jack. And so what we have to do is put them all in timeout and start creating a new world, right? And so the way we start is within our minds. We have to decolonize our minds, and we have to remember that this country is about 2 seconds old on a planet that's been here for thousands of years, and that we belong to each other, right? We belong to each other. Y'all, I don't know you, but now I do. Now I know all y'all's stories. I'm with you. I'm with you. Wherever you want to go, I got your back. And so that we are children of a world that desperately needs to exist. And if you listen closely, she's already here. She's already here. We are here. We are here. We are here. And so, like, buckle up, Buttercup. Here we go. It's on. I'll see you out there. Let's get this shit done. Nice to meet you all.
With that, I'm sorry, we are going to end our discussion on racism and discrimination in America. Thank you guys all for joining. This was awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know we had some issues with Facebook, but I'm going to go ahead and post this live on Facebook once we get off. And I also created a free downloadable list of resources everywhere, everything from books to podcasts that people can listen to get educated on, to things that people can do to get involved right now with different organizations and initiatives. So enjoy the rest of your night, guys. Thank you all for tuning in, and be safe. And hopefully we can do this conversation again in the future. See you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Nice to meet everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.